Welcome to the Crawford Family Forum. Thank you all for joining us here at the forum, and thank all of you for joining us on our live stream. We are in store for a very dynamic evening with a woman that we all hear and we love here at KPCC. As you know, Sandra Tsing Loh is an author, essayist, a performer, an artist. She has had a long history of bravery in the arts. Starting early on with playing the piano as a performance artist, playing the piano on an overpass of an LA freeway. You may have heard about that a few years back. You hear her, again, as Janice said, popular segments, the Lowdown on Science and the Low Life here on KPCC. Again, a regular contributor to The Atlantic, and she's got a whole lot of books. The previous books include Mother on Fire, which had that long-running one-woman show with it. A Year in Van Nuys. Also, A Year in Van Nuys. Shout out to Van Nuys. And also many more, including If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home by Now. The LA Times called that one of the 100 best fiction books of the year it came out. Again, today we're talking about this one. Madwoman in the Volvo, My Year of Raging Hormones. This is Sandra's memoir on midlife and marriage and motherhood and major changes that blew up or maybe blew open her life. And this weekend, the LA Times called Sandra provocative. The New York Times calls her, I like this one, the New York Times calls her a darling of the ever-beleaguered Los Angeles intelligentsia.
Welcome to you all today. I think they're right here in this room. Welcome. The smart people here in Pasadena, the Cambridge of the West.
That's right, that's right. Okay, so we follow you on your journey from Burning Man through sunken pirate ships. You take this voyage to the other side of this particular time of life. But I want to start with giving everyone a little, the bigger picture, right? Lots of people may be on a similar voyage and may or may not actually know they're on the voyage. As a nation, you've talked about we're in the midst of a giant demographic menopausal surge. And I think you called it a menopausa.
Yes.
So explain that. Give us some of those numbers.
So to get our big bullet points out immediately, now women, middle-aged women 45 to 60 are America's largest demographic group. Woo! Almost 50 million of us. Woo! And this is my favorite. By next year, 2015, wait for it, almost one. I know, see, you're getting like the whole, we're just going to do the show this way. Almost 1 in 2 American women will be menopausal. Almost 1 in 2. In fact, women 45 and over will be the majority of American women. So most of us are not making eggs. I'm going to say pretty much right there. And that's a huge deal. And when you look at it sort of developmentally, in the year 1900, the average life expectancy of a U.S. citizen was 48. And now it's like 90 and beyond. We got 94,000 women who are 100 and over.
Wow.
So the shift that, to get our bullet points out, of course, up top, the shift, and this is kind of inspired from Christiane Northrup's The Wisdom of Menopause, which I call the Bible of Menopause. It's an extraordinary book. My quote is on the cover, unattributed. It's Atlantic to me. Not that I'm angry, but not that I'm menopausal. But that essentially her theory, which I've played forward, and it's a great book, but it is 700+ pages, so people find it hard to read through in one sitting. So I tried to sort of essence some of the ideas in my book, which is that menopause, because if one lives to almost 90 and you're only fertile those middle 25 to 30 years, or the middle third of your life, as a woman, menopause isn't the change. Fertility is the change, right? That's, amen. That's, you know what I'm talking about, sister? And that's just a call. You know what I'm talking. You're schwitzing now. We're totally schwitzing right in this room. There's air conditioning the Crawford Ford. All the equipment is like melting down because of the heat and the KPCC, you know. But exactly. So her theory, which is so interesting, is that when menopause, when that estrogen cloud comes down, like let's say at 12 years old, you're just like a normal human being doing your thing. Estrogen cloud comes down, and then you mysteriously have this desire to serve people. and nurture them and put them first. And sort of like a Stepford mom, you start like mysteriously cutting up people's sandwiches and folding their little socks and laying out, serving places for 12 people. And while the rest of the family is sitting around the household, feet up, reading the paper, doing the wee, Googling, whatever it is normal people do. And so hence, when that estrogen cloud lifts, when menopause comes, it's not the change, but it's the return back to where you were as a preteen. Yeah? You're getting me? And in fact, and this is right, you know what? This is call and response. You're getting this. So that, in fact, but scientifically, your hormone levels return to what they were as a preteen girls, a little more free testosterone. Mustaches and driving, angry driving. And that's great, because I'm a faster driver now, which is good, because I'm very slow. So it's a really interesting way of thinking. It's a totally new way of thinking about this, and women have half their lives ahead of them at 50. It's kind of a revolutionary way of thinking about it. Can I say one more thing?
Please.
To get out the bullet points? At the top, and then we'll chat more. But another bullet point, which is interesting, is that I think evolutionarily, it's a really interesting time because we're the largest swarm of menopausal women in history. And Courtney Love also is menopausal, which is, so Gen X is menopausal now. That's why when you said ready, set, menopalooza, that's the idea. It's Gen Xers are doing that now. Is that there's a way to start looking at hormones differently, and that, we used to not want women to talk about, oh, I have this crazy moment, for fear that 51 years after Betty Friedan's, the feminine mystique, that we're going to be accused of being sort of moody and sort of not being able to lean in like Sheryl Sandberg is. I'm leaning to the side and I'm sweating and we don't want that. I want to lean in. But I think we can acknowledge sort of the wide spectrum of feelings that women have and then look at sort of hormones differently. And this is my final point before I go back to you. And that is, we used to just think about the time we're at now, that it used to be, we can't have a woman president because once a month she's going to go crazy and hit the red button. That has never happened in the history of mankind ever. We have that she went crazy and hit the red button. So estrogen really isn't the hormonal liability with politicians. Do you feel where I am going on this? Do you know? I happen to be a Democrat. You can be a Republican. It's all one big tent here, a KPCC, left, right, and center, no rant, no slant. But I'm a very disappointed Democrat. I'm a disappointed Democrat, because what has it been with some of these guys, from Bill Clinton to John Edwards to Gary Hart, that really, estrogen wasn't the liability, testosterone was. Right? Thank you. You're feeling as far as, if you need, some hormonal treatment, sirs, what was that about? Why did you, there's no logic there. They just lost their head and started thinking about the little head. So really, let's, if we're going to talk about hormones, let's talk about everyone's hormones, right? And it's not, thank you. You're right. You know what? It's not just the women. The men have, you got to look at testosterone as being a liability as well. And thank you. Back to you, Shirley.
Well, okay. Well, since we're right in the thick of it now, you're talking about hormones, and you already talked about how you touched on how it used to be. This is almost a word that people were afraid to say in the past. So when it was sort of unveiled to you that might be what you're going through as you were in altered states, you found some relief in it, though, right? Or what? What was your? How did you come to terms with even owning that word for yourself?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And what happened to me, and it's described in the book, where it came and for years, actually, my editor at The Atlantic, Ben Schwartz, was like, you got to do this menopause piece. And he kept coming after me. I kept running away from him. It's oh, I don't want to do the menopause piece because menopause has so many negative connotations. That's why I think in the questionnaires that you have, I've been doing it nationwide. It's because you're dry in every conceivable place and crepey and old and used up and that sort of thing. And these are the crone years. That word is not an awesome word, but I register what they're trying to do, but something else. So, but I found how it affected me, and perimenopause is that section before menopause where the hormone levels are going up and down like that, and that can start in your 30s. Amen. I love this amen. We're just kind of turn this place into,
church, man.
Yeah. It can start as early as in your 30s and last between 4 and 15 years. exactly. And then when you think about it, although it's kind of like, and you can have the night sweats and hot flashes and bloating and sleeplessness and anxiety and panic, sometimes all at the same time, and depression, although many women will hear that list and say, how's that really so different from my life before menopause, right? Except for the hot flashes. I mean, it's not easy being a woman like ever, right? Right? I mean, can we talk? Can we talk? But I experienced it for myself, and I described it in the book as sort of driving on the 134 freeway, which many of us spend half our time on the freeways. And the other small note I want to insert before I answer your question is there's also a theme of happiness in this book. There's a lot of questions about, are we as women happier now? They've done some longitudinal studies to say, even though we have our own money and our own jobs and raise families, we can kind of parent and work at the same time, that women are not happier now than they were before. And they've done studies of of happiness across the planet, and they found that there are a couple of things that people all do not like regardless of what country or continent they're on. And the top 3 things that make them unhappy are childcare, housework, and commuting.
Commuting?
Ding, 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 yeah. It's like just putting that out there if anyone's living that life in their Volvo, in their metaphorical Volvo. So I'm driving along. It's one of those days I was thinking about refinancing, which usually makes me feel so excited, because with interest rates being as low as they are, yay! Middle-aged, pleasure. And I found, didn't describe in this book, I was listening to KUSC, not KPCC, at that moment, because I just needed that classical music, right? Sometimes you just need that classical music. And I found that Vivaldi was playing, and trumpets were playing, and I was filled with rage of like, Vivaldi, he wrote the same piece over and over and over again. Do you know that? Because they just kind of played it once, and then they'd throw out the music so the king would just have another one. But I go it's like instead of spring, it's like spring, 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 spring. And then I found myself thinking about dinner, and that I promised my daughters we would have make your own pizza for dinner, which is this horrible thing that helicopter moms have invented where it's disgusting and you have to go to Trader Joe's and get the 2 kinds of roby dough and there's no park-in. You know what I'm talking about? They have really bad samples mid-afternoon. And even though we're laughing, if you have a mid-afternoon glucose drop, you know that between 3 and 5, that's why so many of us go to Costco. It's just like gobbling the samples and getting that 15 flab of croissant, just flinging ourselves on it like a Wolverine. In any case, back to your question, Shirley. I don't know. I've been 2 weeks on the book tour. I don't know where I am. Sorry about that. But I found that in thinking about the burnt pizza stone and just cutting up the vegetables, that I suddenly had a mood plunge like through the bottom of my car. My whole world tipped in a way that was sort of not funny. It was very disorienting because, your hormones dictate your personality and your energy level and your chemicals and all that stuff. And it completely tipped over where I found I couldn't face the simplest things like a laundry basket, United Air Miles, paying the Visa, whatever it was, without having such a mood plunge that I just couldn't get out of bed. And I describe it in the book of, some days of like going, oh my God, the sun is so bright. I'm going to just get through the day by doing hash marks on a legal pad, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and shading in each hour as it goes by. My very own shades of gray. See, and why, but if I may mark for a moment, because kind of like, you're depressed, that's hilarious. But I think that there needs to be a vocabulary for really bad, gloomy, amorphous, foggy, swampy, fen of feeling really dark. And that we always don't have that vocabulary. Like when you go to Wells Fargo and the teller will go, how's your Wednesday going? And you go, horribly. I cried, and I just kind of popped some pimples, and I threw my coffee cup at my husband, and my pants don't zip up. We don't have really vocabulary for that. So that's why that's what I started experiencing in this particular time. And that's sort of what sets off the whole journey of the book. And hence, when I told another girlfriend of mine what I was going through, she said, well, if you haven't had a period, you could be entering menopause. And I said, menopause? menopause. That's awesome. I thought it was going mad or something. Because I'm sure there's a pill for that. Or Pfizer has made something for menopause, and I'll just go and get this patch or whatever it is. So that's why I thought, well, this is a really simple solution. And I think, given that I've lived in Los Angeles all my life, and the one person who's ready, you're in Van Nuys. Thank you. In LA, and I grew up in Malibu, so it's kind of like at 36, I was already dead by LA standards. So it's kind of like, for me, there isn't really much of a fear about aging, because, and then we have Jane Fonda, who's 75, doing TED Talks, and we got Betty White, who's like 1,013 and looks great. So I think that's how I got over the word, because I didn't feel defined by it.
But it gave you a context for what was going on for you.
Yeah, that there might be some physical things that I could do to handle what was going on emotionally.
Okay, so then there wasn't really a pill or a patch, but you and your team of friends decided to go to Burning Man. That was was the thing that you decided to do. So you're in the middle of this midlife, raising kids, caring for parents, marriage, 20 years in. It seemed like it was going okay, sort of, a little dull, but then you... You headed with the tribe to Burning Man in the dry, delirious desert, and things sort of burnt up. I don't know. Firestorm happened there.
Yes, they did. You're really hurling the softballs today, Shirley. Thank you for that. We could have kept with the joke. Okay, all right. So this is backing up, and this is another incident in the book, and another theme of the book is like midlife crisis, really midlife blow-ups. And we used to think of just men having them and getting the red sports car and dating the younger secretary, but now in the new, more even-gendered thing, women can have them too. So I and a bunch of girlfriends, in my other book, Mother on Fire, I've been a big public school activist, and that's been a real strong thing for me. And we would throw political rallies, like at the Sacramento Capitol steps, for our kids, and getting more educational funding. And through that, we learned how to drive an RV. And as a woman, if you have never driven an RV, consider that part of your liberation, driving a truck. It's awesome. So, and camping. So just from like driving these RVs, and we go, man, we camped with 100 women and children before protesting. So we started having these big birthdays, like 40 and 45 and 50. And we thought we would embrace these birthdays. Like I like to say, when women turn 50 in Los Angeles, they often have to go off-site to do it. Right? They leave the country, go to Paris for 2 weeks, let the thing flip to zeros and come back as though from an exotic outpatient procedure, sunglasses, I'm better. Yeah, nothing happened, I'm fine. So we decided that we would go to Burning Man to see the art. How many of you fine KPC listeners in the Crawford Forum have been to Burning Man? Oh, wait.
2,
3, 4, 5. That's 5 more than I thought. And they're all sitting on the same side of the room. What's that about? Pretty interesting. Yeah, good stuff. And Burning Man, for those of you who don't know, is like an annual pagan art festival happening in the Nevada desert where 50,000 people build a temporary city, and there is nudity and hallucinogenic drugs and a lot of sharing. And sharing of what? We don't know. But we had like 8 women. We piled together an RV to go. And for safety, we brought my male chaperone, who was my longtime business partner of 10 years and my best platonic friend. And what happened there is when we got out there, everybody had been holding it together for so long that people started, as in a truth serum, confessing really hellacious things. Like, I can't even tell you. It's like, I've been fired once from radio before for saying the wrong word. I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to. But I think you can see where people start confessing things about their marriages that you just didn't want to know. And about and one woman was thinking of having an affair. And she said, because sometimes it was a traveling LAUSD theater teacher at her son's school. She's also married to a traveling LAUSD theater teacher. So what are you doing? And she just said, sometimes you can look at someone who you've known for many years and suddenly see them in a new way. And then I go, ew. But then I thought about my longtime business partner, my best male friend, and we had been best friends in what I call that affable 40-something late afternoon beer garden of life. you know, where you can be a friend with another married person and we have kids and nothing will ever happen and you just hang out and you just have a beer and it's nice. And then suddenly I go, well, maybe, I guess and I was going to tell him, you know, she's thinking I have an affair. She's whacked. And he goes, oh, that's never a good idea. Adjusting his sarong in the desert. And then I go, yeah, and he goes, why? And I go, you know what? Because she says you can know someone for a long time and one day see them in a totally different way. And I kept talking, and I guess I love you and have always been in love with you for 10 years, but we've been married and with our flat affects, so nothing's ever going to happen because we have kids. And oh my God, now as in a tragic Merchant Ivory movie, nothing will happen, and now I see all I have lost, and now excuse me while I go hurl my youth into the fire. And it was one of those moments where suddenly something, and I mean, when I talked about that cloud lifting, and literally in Burning Man, there was a sandstorm that came up. You can't write this, it's like a cliche, middle-aged something. It's on the front page of the New York Times, that this sandstorm came for like 7 hours and imprisoned us like Buto dancers in the desert. And it was this experience where this train has left the station and you become unmoored and you know, what's driving you. And I think that I've written a lot about marriage, like in The Atlantic, which we can talk about also, of like, you know, it was one of those things. It was I had an affair, and we had an affair. We were both married with children. It just blew sky high. It was the most traumatic thing that happened. We heard, I mean, and it just was a complete mess and terrible. But I think there's also a theme that I hear about, because I've been doing this for about 2 weeks, of love, that what we still do crave, even if we're 45 or older, or 55 or 65 or 75, it's like the feeling of being in love. And you think you'll never have it again. But if you have it at like 46 and you feel in love with someone and they're in love with you, you kind of go, I'm going to make a run for it. So I'm not on my deathbed at 90, 112, Betty White years, whatever, and regret that you never had it, because it's so rare, I say, to even find someone you can stand to be with for 25 minutes. You know what I mean? A little bit like that, as like aside from having the HBO series that you both love. So, which is the way most of us get through our marriages. And live streaming at KPCC on a Thursday night, Wednesday night. So that's what happened. And so I think the midlife explosion was kind of, you know, was it hormonal? Was it part of it? I mean, there are some theories that people in their 40s start feeling different hormonal things, and it's kind of the storm, where for me it was like a second adolescence of just wanting to be in love and have adventures and feel those things and be outside of my restricted world that I've carved for myself as a working mom.
And so it did. You blew it open. The family, there's wreckage. At the same time, you're kind of going on this adventure.
Right.
There are twists and turns.
Yes.
The pirate ship that you embark on sort of collapses, and
right.
Sort of, there's a whole scene of you hurling the literary classics into a Dempsey dumpster, and the sound of the clanging of these weighted tombs.
Yeah, because what happened was we had this thing for like 4 months, and then we go, we got to come clean with our families. So with a team of therapists standing by, that of course will sort of receive and manage everyone's response, and that will be handled, you know, for a fee covered by insurance. It'll be fine. You think if people communicate openly, but you know, human beings are human beings. We feel what we feel. This is awful. So we moved together for a few months, and then after a few months, my boyfriend moved back home to his family to help them solve really a lot of painful things that we're going through. So for that period of time, I was alone in this kind of bachelor cottage, you know, in the middle of your life with all your clothes in twist-tied trash bags in the tub, and everyone feels sorry for you. At the Atlantic, it's like, oh my God. All your married friends are like, oh my God. I remember at the time there's this LA Times piece about me that was so mean. I actually never read it, but it was one of those things where people call you and your friends go, I'm so sorry. Like, yes, I know, it's pretty bad. But I wasn't even aware of it because I was just also in so much pain. And also at this particular time, also described in the book, it's kind of like I couldn't sleep at night, so I wisely got a prescription for Ambien, which I wisely paired with Chardonnay, and woke up with this claw, and it was this really metaphorical thing where I couldn't write checks or kind of get a new Ralph's card or pick up the cell phone or drive a car. So it was really a midlife metaphor. But if you look actually in midlife, people can be in their 40s or so. They can be having job explosions and divorce and also some physical ailment at the same time. And there's some woo-woo stuff in the book. I'm not very woo-woo, but it sort of makes sense that, they say that at 40 in the East, the Kundalini starts rising up through the chakras. You're getting like that, and it kind of like clears all these chakras as you go up. And even though it's kind of a woo-woo tale that is outside what Dr. Phil might say, there's something about this marriage that you need to start dealing with stuff in your midlife and take care of all your family history and your blockages and whatever for your health. So that was kind of that journey, and then we eventually got back together.
And I think you described yourself as, I think you said unfairly blessed, because this whole thing, you torpedo the family in a sense, and yet, and some people might have a hard time sort of actually making that adolescent vision of romance that you real, and yet you're still together, and you've managed to make it real, and you've managed to move and build your life forward, and I think use the word unfairly blessed to describe.
Well, I considered it unfairly blessed because it was kind of like it's morally wrong to have an affair when you're married. It totally is. So that was not a good thing, and the sneaking around it really wasn't. But on the other hand, and it's not a but, I had been in my first relationship for 20 years. So that's a long period of time. It wasn't like it was like it was an adjustment in midlife. And then also, in a way, I now think about marriage of like since we're married, we live so much longer and are married so much longer, what is the meaning of marriage? And is it, sometimes, and there's theories of kind of like human infatuation or romantic feelings lasting 4 years. Helen Fisher talks about that, because 4 years evolutionarily is the time it takes for people to meet, have a kid, get the kid big enough so it can walk around, and then the romantic feelings go off after 4 years, and that most species are not monogamous. The short list includes like an anglerfish and a tapeworm, where the partners are fused together till death. Bonobos certainly are. I mean, that said, we know like in the 70s, like open marriages did not work. We're just not geared for that. So socially, there's something, and I think that's wonderful, that we're not just slaves of biology. We do like to be married. We don't like to have multiple partners or, those key parties like in the ice storm. But we like to do it together. But I think I've come to a place of sort of less judgment. I still judge Woody Allen, don't you? We did, even though like he's a great movie maker, but I can't quite get over that one, quite, really. But I think there's a lot of sort of quiet, not like suffering that people go through in their lives, and some merit. Sometimes you're the loneliest if you're in a marriage. Sometimes, if marriages are like that, and. I don't know. I have a lot of sympathy for everybody struggling.
Well, for people struggling, you seem to have some kind of clarity or certainty. How did you know in this sort of, the way you just described it, that you were finding your truth and going to the next journey of your life versus just sort of coming unhinged and, things were collapsing? Like, for someone else going through it in the middle of it, how would they know that they're making the wise, moving on to the next phase?
Well, that's a good question. I think for myself, even in the most miserable time, and the funny, because the U-Haul that you're talking about is like right on this block. I think it's like it's that U-Haul. It's that very U-Haul that I had all my stuff in. Like, I put it in a U-Haul storage thing, and I flung all my books in a dumpster because I couldn't fit them anywhere. The U-Haul right there. And I think at the time, I felt completely unhinged, like I was like this, I said in the book, like the star of one of those hilarious hangover movies, but it's totally not hilarious for any reason at all. So I felt quite unglued and just really, however, when I thought about it, I thought, even though, you know, I had an affair with someone and he moved back home before I moved, like, it's like, I still don't regret that because that seemed like the right thing to do. And we also had been friends for 10 years. We'd been best friends for 10 years. So that gave sort of that comfort there. I think, weirdly, I have found on this particularly book coming out is that people will often come out to me afterwards and go, or on a plane, it's like, oh my God, I've never told anyone this, but I think I'm going to have an affair now, and blah, 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 and all this information comes out. I think there are a lot of people kind of thinking about, you know, I don't know, their lives, and I think to a certain extent, even if people have some sort of affair and it breaks up their marriage, mostly the people who I've talked to, and even if they don't end up with that person, they mostly do not regret leaving that marriage. They mostly feel it's a better place for them not to be married. They mostly do. Amen. So there you go. So wow. Yeah, they mostly do.
Wow. So you had this big epic firestorm, but other people have different stories. And you talk in your book about your mom, and instead of a sort of a big epic firestorm, it was more of a receding.
Right, exactly.
As an example,
yeah, no, that's
or something.
Exactly. No, that's a good point, and I think that I juxtapose my being at this time of my life with my mother, and I say my mother, who grew up in Southern California in the '60s and '70s, I call that sherbet-colored dreamscape. Instead of like the Mad Men era, I think of it as the Mad Woman era, where, man, the ladies used to put on lipstick and heels just to go to the store or to go to the butcher. You know, you had a butcher then. The Buick and tail fins. I would like zoom around in an apron in the kitchen and a pleated tennis skirt on the tennis court, and everything was very, as opposed to my filthy Volvo, everything was really different. You know, and one thing is like pregnancy was different. I don't know if anybody recalls that period of time, but you know, they could smoke while pregnant and have martinis and were prescribed amphetamines by their chain-smoking doctors so they wouldn't gain more than 12 pounds, you know, and there's no videotaping of the baby. The man were out golfing, you know, when labor, you know, as opposed to today where women, you know, we're not supposed to smoke or drink or we can eat only kale, and there's, you know, just like, ugh, if I never eat kale again, that's one of the things, I will not do Pilates or kale because kale is not the solution. I'm over it. You know, or they go, you know, you can't have smoked fish due to secondhand smoke. That's another thing that I heard once. So that was different, but as a result, you know, everything was different. Child rearing was different. There's an interesting statistic that today an average full-time working mother spends more time per week with her kids than an average 1950s stay-at-home mother. And that's because they used to just ride your bike around the neighborhood. We'll see you when it gets dark. And we'll have pot roast and mashed potatoes and no vegetable, because that's awesome. Yay, Sloppy Joe. That's a meal. That was a meal. So it's different now. And what we experienced in that time, though, and my mom was a housewife, is that, you know, for so many years she's standing in the kitchen, you know, drying dishes, and then one day she's hurling them. So that a lot of women suddenly turned, and they suddenly threw things, and it's kind of like they're setting the table, and suddenly they take an entire roast leg of lamb and hurl it out the plate glass window. Or, you know, God, like one woman said her mom hurled all the china into the fireplace, and nobody knew why, or she was hurling a Bible into the cat or something like that. So that's what we experienced, just this very sudden turn. And then my mother took to her bedroom for, you know, curtains drawn, door closed for hours. Sometimes moms went for days, weeks. And a couple of people told me, like, my mom went to bed for 4 years in North Dakota, wow, where the winters were long, and just knew mom was there, and the kids could visit and play an instrument or something, well, recorder for a minute, but that women really took it very, very differently then, and they didn't have, you know, Dr. Phil or Oprah or whatever we have now. That said, I think one of the reasons that I wanted to write this particular book is that when I went on my perimenopausal journey, Shirley, and I went and tried to get books on menopause, you know, instead of the fanged Medusa head you expect to see on the front of a menopausal book, you always see kind of like a daisy or a poppy and a stethoscope. You know, and the advice is also, yeah, you may be in a rage and no libido and hungry and angry and you haven't slept in 10 years, and that's okay. All you need to do is cut out alcohol, sugar, and caffeine. Yay, happy day, happy day. You know, sometimes that gets some of us up on a Monday morning. And, you know, just be sure if you're having trouble sleeping, get plenty of walks in, 8 glasses of water a day, 8 glasses. I have never had 8 glasses of water in one day. That's too much. I think that's too much water. There can be too much water. Yoga stretches before bed, and always kale. Kale. Don't you think it's enough? Like, did the kale producers pay someone? Like, cruciferous vegetables? Why? It's not, I say no. Chocolate and vodka and Xanax and whatever else. So anyway, yes, it was different, and so they dealt with it that way, and coming to terms that my mother, and then she also got early Alzheimer's disease. So it was just, and her life, I certainly remember her at the same age that I was. We gave her this, she was like 48, this glass Pyrex baking dish for her birthday because she baked so much and would love to bake, and she hurled it against the wall. She just said, you know, this is so cruel, you think of me as your baker. So I think one of the themes in this also is that, that she never got to be anything but a housewife. I think she would have been a great writer. Her letters are to die for. They're just hilarious. But she just wasn't in a place where she could divorced my father because she didn't have her own money, and it was kind of like, and I remember at that time, you know, it's so, now that I'm so like vain at 52, I'm like although the great thing is I can rarely find my Target reading glasses, so I look in the mirror and I look fine. It's like, I know, like, I can't see the stuff so well, so I guess I look great. It's like, put my lipstick on over here. Just like, I'm awesome. But she really had, you know, and it's stupid to say, it's kind of silly to say, but she had this really big gouge in her forehead, and she was a very lovely woman. And so every night as kids, she'd make us, like, massage the wrinkle in her forehead right here, you know, because it was one of those canyons. And I just think, for today, even though we sort of mock cosmetic surgery and the restyling and the Botox and the lowlights, you know, if something really bugs you and then you want to just puff it up, I think that's like totally fine. So I just think women at that particular time didn't have as many options that we have now. So if you have a bit of vanity and you have a mustache, you just want to get rid of the mustache, that's fine. You know, who's going to make fun of you? So answer your question.
So that was what you talk about is old menopause and new menopause.
Yeah.
And you know, you've talked throughout our conversation about some of the different symptoms, but, you know, of course, there's the hot flashes, and what about forgetfulness and short attention span? Did you ever think that you were, like, having some kind of early onset Alzheimer's, or did you sort of relate it to the time of life, or?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? They're so easy. Come on, yeah. Like what? Like, I don't know. What were you saying? What? Okay, kale. No kale. Forgetfulness. I don't know. I have been forgetting things for so many. Like, since my children came, I cannot remember any child's name at all. You know, it's like Colin, Colby, Coley, whatever. Just call him Honey. Just, hi, honey. Like, so ever since I became a mother, I just forgot everything, and their little socks, and I say it like I found in my Volvo, I found, like, you know, boys' Spider-Man underpants in my Volvo, which is weird as I have only daughters. Like, where'd that come from? So I think ever since I just had kids, it's all gone anyway. So yeah, I mean, forgetfulness. Yeah. What was the question exactly? So yeah.
Okay, so you've talked about this a little bit too. You've done a lot of traveling already, at least a couple weeks of traveling already. The book came out early this month, and talking to women, and you've given us a little bit of the feedback. But what are some of the things? What are some stories you're hearing from other people that are sort of resonating or relating to or different from some of the?
Well, I love that question. I mean, I was on Point with Tom Ashbrook, and one woman, and it's the middle of the day, and one woman was calling in. She says, "Oh my God!" And I talk about this triple M generation, middle-aged mothers in menopause. So at the age, let's say late 48 or 51, the age when in ancient cultures, if women got that far, she would be allowed to go off to a cave and be alone. we're surrounded by all these people. So the metaphor of the Volvo is there's a woman driving a family wagon. She has a couple teens next to her, elderly parent in back, dog way in the back that needs his pills. The air conditioning is turned down to 20 degrees. And there was a woman who indeed called in and said, oh my God, I'm living this. I'm driving with my 4 children across the country to get my elderly dad to have him come live with us. And she goes, and I feel like I need some tequila right now. And I love the call-ins you get to NPR. You know, those are some good call-ins. And then I got like another letter from a guy that said, like, my wife was crying and depressed and angry, and she just, I don't know what to say to her, but she heard you on the radio. So at midnight last night, when her insomnia begins, she downloaded it on the Kindle and comforted herself for 4 hours. I think she's staying up till 4 a.m. But I mean, it's kind of like where there was that. But one of the most interesting things I've been experiencing is the response in letters from men.
Okay.
And I think men, funnily enough, I think they've really, and many of it, like, respond to something and they go, well, because they have their stories too. And I think, and they really feel things and have also suffered and think a lot of their different thoughts. I mean, actually on Michael Krasny forum I was on, and first when I went on, there was angry calls coming in. And the first one was kind of like a guy who said, you know what? As a man, if I'd gone to Burning Man and had an affair and broken up my marriage, I wouldn't be on a book tour like you, and I'd be run out of town. And he had a good point, although not that I haven't taken my own, you know, certainly from the Atlantic and other places. But I go, well, that's true. There is a double standard to a certain extent, but perhaps there needn't be. I have found in this particular journey that I have become more sympathetic to men. And I've written about, certainly in this book, about those moods that we talk about, the dark moods. Women totally overshare. Of course we do. And we blab all the time. But I had a male friend in the course of this who had some really serious bipolar issues, and he finally committed suicide. And I think if you think of like Spalding Gray or David Foster Wallace, that male depression, midlife depression, is a real thing. And it's a real thing. It's not necessarily talked about. They have even less outlets than we do. And it's made me think, and I wish that there would be a place for men to share. And I sort of think I've come weirdly to look at a little bit more sympathy on the male midlife crisis thing, because and now we live in a new time where the women are not necessarily dependent on the men to support the entire household. So it used to be that story of like, he turned 45, he got a red sports car, he dated the young secretary, and oh, poor wife is left behind. But then you can see it another way of kind of like, well, if his wife, and you hear this a lot from the men, if the wife, gained 50 pounds of baby weight with a baby and never got rid of it, and then just started in doilies, and then the kids are grown up and out, but she still feels at 21 they need to be brought, chicken soup when they're sick, you know what? Maybe he wants a fresh start, and so maybe they should get his and hers sports cars. That everybody should have a midlife moment if it is, and that's okay. And I'm not saying to be sort of irresponsible and just be mean, but if people have been together for 20 years and then suddenly they're wanting a shift, even if it's a shift in the relationship they already have, I don't think that's necessarily always a bad impulse.
We're going to hear from you in just a moment. Anybody who has any questions, we have a couple of people who are going to be walking around with microphones, so just raise your hand, and we're going to take your questions as well, again, in just a moment. So from all you learned, you studied, you just mentioned that men, may not have a place to share, or, male depression in midlife might not be well understood, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you sort of threw yourself into research. You found the books with the daisies and the poppies on the cover, and you even went to Menopause the Musical, which might be its own story.
And I laughed my butt off.
So do you think at this age, as opposed to the old menopause, the new menopause, I mean, is there enough information out there? Is it a topic that's studied and understood, or becoming more understood? Or do you feel like it's still a little bit under wraps and there's not real clarity about it?
Well, I I think, like I said, the Christiane Northrup book is great. And I actually read that book when I was in my 30s, before I was menopausal at all, because I just thought the phrase, the wisdom of menopause, was so interesting. So I was reading about it much younger. And I think that, that the information is in there, but it's maybe not as easy to digest because it's just in a long form. I think, and this may is not the direct answer to your question, but I think it's both evolutionary biology is we're older, we're living longer. My dad is 93. Our older parents are living longer. Just lifespans are longer, and that's really interesting. I think some of it is a little bit. They say that as men get older, they get more conservative, and women get older, they get more radical. It's a trope, but it might be true. Where I started thinking about. Just how we think about the phases of a woman's life. And I'm going to try to say this in a polite way. I think some of it is how we frame. I think that people don't necessarily like menopause because, older people in American culture are maybe not revered, although with Regis Philbin, it's changing. It's great. Barbara Walters, it's like, it could be that it's changing, but, I think that I am 52. I'm about as old as the second wave of women's liberation. Where one thing that I've been hearing a lot as I go around the country when people go, I gotta tell you this, and I go, oh no, TMI, what's it now? That I know anecdotally, and it'll be like women 50 or over who are either divorced or their kids are out of the house or whatever are, how can we say this, are enjoying themselves again in a physical. Can I say that? They're having sex. Can I say that? They're having a lot of sex. Okay. Did I say? Okay. You're still with me. And that was sort of an interesting. And they wanted to tell me about it, which is alarming. There was women in a beach town holding Chardonnays, and they're going, "We're gonna write a book called Lifting the Veil: Sex Over 50." No, put the veil down. Put the veil down. But it's interesting to hear this, and it's kind of great because it reverses one of the given true, let's say, wisdom we're giving about menopause is that, if I may, I know this is slightly purple, but won't be too purple, is that in menopause, women lose their sex drive. And it's like going, when did we have a sex drive? Was it in my 40s when I had toddlers or breastfeeding a kid when I didn't want anyone to touch me? And I'm like, I don't even recall having one ever. So it's kind of like, I don't know what that even means. It can be reported by some, but if you've been in like a long-term marriage, I mean, it's like, I don't know what that even means. So that's past wisdom to us. What does that even mean? Given also that anecdotally, I haven't done a study yet, I can see women who are financially independent, et cetera, who are kind of the opposite to a point where I don't even want to hear them talk about it anymore because it's enough. But then I compare it to younger women when we used to think about the sexual liberation. I think it's kind of an exciting opportunity to look at the last 50 years of women's history in a totally different way and make a totally different narrative. And I think that and I have two daughters, 12 and 13, the sexual liberation was awesome, wasn't it? As a young woman in college, now you had to go Dutch. If the guy dated 4 other people in a week, that was great. If you didn't, maybe you were fringing, because sexual liberation. And the thing is not that liberation for young women because they're full of eggs. Right? They really are in danger of having a couple too many beers and forgetting the birth control, and it's really a danger for them that they don't it's not liberation for them. Now, for these ladies who are in no danger of getting pregnant, it is liberating for them, but does culture really not want to think about women that age getting busy? Is it more pleasant to think of younger women, getting busy because we think it's more physically, visually appealing? I don't know. So I think that I actually question everything, all the received wisdom about menopause. I question it all, and so there.
Okay, well, I like that. Okay, so in the end, I mean, it almost seems like it seems like there should be some ritualized rite of passage in our modern era.
Yes.
in our Twitterverse. I don't know what would that look like, or what would that be, because it's a sort of
great question. I have an answer. I have an answer for that. So again, instead of menopause being the change where you kind of pull over to the side of the freeway, you're done, you're crepey and you're very dry, and every part of your body, please move aside so the human race can continue. Which they used to think of, historically, we didn't even go into that, but from the Greeks on men, I would say there's a history of menopause, not a herstory, a history. And they really termed it, like in the 1800s, of like a disease and a hysterical condition with all these symptoms like, pseudo-narcotism, temporary deafness, uncontrollable peevishness, and there was a great one called hysterical flatulence. As opposed to calm flatulence, angry, what other kind of flatulence, but hysterical flatulence. So that's pretty good. So instead of that being, I think about it this way, using Christiane Northrup's things like you began living on Earth for a while, then you went to the moon for a while, colonized it, launched a few eggs successfully, thank you. Now you're back down on Earth. Welcome home. Throw yourself a welcome home party, or have yourself a baby shower for that little tummy that you're carrying that's carrying the new you. I'm pregnant with myself. That's why I can't button my pants. I'm awesome. So, you know what? And they have these Tibetan monks that practice Tumo yoga, where they try to make hot flashes come to clear their chakras. So it's awesome that we can do that without having to fly to Tibet, because I don't have the air miles that we're doing that. So it's kind of like, it's an awesome, like, to think of it as just welcome home. You're back in your life. You got half or so ahead of it. And so we should throw ourselves welcome home parties.
Oh, welcome home party. All right.
Yeah. Why not? It's really good.
All right, now we're welcoming you. Please join the conversation. If you have a question, try to keep it concise, because I bet a lot of people want to throw a question to Sandra. So Janice is walking around with a mic.
Oh, I hate that. I'm sorry. Anyway, just out of I'm Ann Bannon, and 5-10 years ago, you couldn't even say the word menopause without guys freaking, or even some of your female friends freaking. But nowadays, I'm finding it regularly in my Facebook feed. It's kind of weird. Why do you think that is? Is it just the nature of us baby boomers that we tend to be more out there, or is it the fact that there are just so damn many of us out there going through it?
Well, that's a great question, and some of the stuff in your feed may be some products you're being sold, exciting, like our bunion toe spreaders and our bathing caps and vaginal creams. Thank you, you said it on me. Or bathing suits with skirts down below the knee, which is also awesome. And I think the one thing is, like, baby boomers are pushing for, it's great. I think many things are happening that are so different and interesting, and like, we're just gonna own it, whatever it is. We certainly are in an age, with Wikipedia, et cetera, where everybody knows everybody's age now. There isn't like, it's kind of, Cher is like, ooh, or Madonna. It's like, I will always be 4 years younger than Madonna. As I always say, if 40 pounds heavier, always. And Cher, and look at the Rolling Stones. They're like about 2012, and they're right. So I think that on the one hand, age is being looked at a whole different person, because that's just a generation where they're just not going to take it. They're not going to be sidelined. I don't know, like Mick Jagger keeps looking like Mick Jagger, but he does. It's just a different, they're just taking it a different way. And I think with menopause, and I think, Oprah and Katie Couric, and there are people like that have not really lied about their age. So they're out there as well, although some people still really don't like the word. And, and so when I was at Cheryl Strayed, who wrote Wild, she had a book party in Oregon for me, and it was like hysterical. All these women together of like, what's a different word? And freedom, or the Renaissance, people have said, or she liked the rock and roll years. And I think one thing that we kind of own that, and that's in my book, is like, I have a thing of like, now that I'm 50. And a neighbor of mine used to say that. She used to say, now that I'm 50, I don't have to do stuff that I don't want to do anymore. Like, I used to visit my husband's in-laws, my in-laws in Cleveland for 20 years, and they hate me. Now that I'm 50, I don't have to go anymore, see them ever again. I put my time in now that I'm 50. So I think there's a way that it is not so bad. And And I think that aging isn't really what it was, looked like before, and I think that's part of it, and it has changed.
Somebody else has a question? Over here, say your name also, please.
Hi, I'm Sherry Bonner, and I also work for Planned Parenthood. So I thought before I made a comment, I would just say that the biggest increase in STDs is in older people. So just as a bit of caution, they may not be able to get pregnant, but you know.
Yeah, good point. You heard it here in the Crawford Forum.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
And just to hear you talking about having an affair, and it just seems to me that it's not something that's talked about very much in our culture. And so I wonder what you're getting in response to that, and do you think that this is sort of an opportunity for some more openness around something that seems to happen in, I don't know what the percentage is, like 50% of marriages?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that question because I've certainly been on a journey with this. Sort of my experience when I first wrote about this in The Atlantic in a piece called, like, let's call the whole thing off, that there was a lot of, really a lot of backlash and just you're a horrible person, et cetera. And I had been with the same person for 20 years. I had children and I had an affair. So it was a really, really bad thing. But I think especially women and mothers, I think there's something about, that moms are supposed to be a certain way, that mothers have to have this, they have just a bit of a higher standard to adhere to than the rest of the culture. Like if a father does so, it was a really tough thing. And I think at that particular time, and that's why this book is really kind of, in a way, has been sort of a risk, but so is that it's so unlikable often for a woman to say she's had an affair. It's a hard thing. And in fact, for my first draft of the book, I sort of kind of left it out-ish, sort of, at the end. Just a suburban mom like you. And I kind of like make the comparison between this and the bridges of Madison County. Now, Francesca was, I believe, the same age, 46, the average onset of perimenopause. It's right historically, it's scientifically accurate. But, in that case, it was accepted by America because they only had an affair for 4 days. She went back to her husband at the 4-H club in Ohio, weighing the heifers. She never wrote back in any of his letters for 16 years. And then at the beginning of the book, she's been conveniently dead for many years. So that's sort of, she got her comeuppance so that, like, we've dealt with that, And, but I think that there is stigma about that, but I think so many people, they're not, they're not cheating sequentially all the time, or they're really, people's heart, they try very hard, and nobody wants to blow up their families and that sort of thing. So I think that in talking about it, and just taking all the consequences, because it wasn't an easy thing at all. It was terrible. But I think that I started hearing from a lot more people about it, and I did the show at Joe's Pub in New York earlier this week, and I found a lot of people were coming up with their second partner. It was kind of like it was like date night for them because a lot of people had done this. Many more people than I thought had done this. It's not to recommend it, but they do. So, maybe we'll start talking about it more.
Over here.
You talked about you couldn't take a pill or a patch. I did both of those. And I think that really made a big difference for women, that they didn't have to suffer through the symptoms anymore. And but did you speak about that in the book? I didn't buy it yet. So.
Well,
yeah.
Well, it was for many years, right? Hormone replacement therapy was the biggest prescribed drug in the country, and then about 10 years ago, the study said, a lot of people are being hurt by this, and then it was just uniformly cut off.
Right.
And then...
but I think the pendulum has swung back, where it's kind of like certain low levels of hormones sort of administered for, at least a short period of time, if not longer, are safe. And it was like the Premarin or the Prem-Pro combination that was like made from horse urine, which is like, ooh, but now there are those things that can provide comfort, and it's amazing. And in the book, I ended up finally, after a year, going to a gynecologist, I put it off for a year because I couldn't stand being weighed. You know, like going to the doctor, you feel bad enough already. Do we have to open with getting on the scale every time? Why? Just wave a laser over me and go, you're about a size 12. All right, fine. I'm bloated, okay? You don't have to put me on a scale to, Jesus. I'm over 50. I don't have to get on the scale anymore. Take this, or just jump on the scale and just, you get on the scale. You get on the scale with me, doctor. Let's do this one together. Woo! You know, yeah, we should do that. So I finally did, and then she gave me just a little bit of like estrogen gel, and just the thought that I could have something. That people started, hey, can I have some of your gel? So that's really, and I should have brought with it tonight, so that if you buy a book, I give you a pump of gel. And people do these passes, so it's kind of awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And I did that for a while. It's good.
I think over here. Here comes the mic.
Hi, I'm Julie Buchanan. I'm also have been a nurse for a very long time, but remember when we were young in the junior high and they sent the boys away and we watched that movie? Well, where is the frickin' movie when you go into menopause? They never show you that movie.
Yes, exactly.
You're just crazy and you don't know.
Exactly. Where is that movie? Where's that movie? That's right. We're going to make it. We're going to make the movie right now. All right. Yeah. Geraldo, come in. You're ready. You're ready now. Exactly. Thank you.
Amy Brockway Metcalf. So I have a young daughter, and I did the math. I counted my fingers, and I'm going to be menopausal when she's going through puberty.
Ah.
And I was wondering if you had any advice about that.
You had an Irma Bombeck quote about that.
Yeah, the Irma Bombeck quote is like, I'm very fascinated by this generation. They've adjusted the timetable for childbearing so that teaching a 16-year-old to drive a car and entering menopause will occur in the same week. But it could be, in a way, like a good thing, like I found, like with my preteens, since all of us have the same hormone levels, so nobody is in a nurturing estrogen cloud. So as I describe in the book, it's like our house is like, it looks like a bunch of bachelor male serial killers live there. Nobody's making their bed, nobody's doing kind of like, showering or stuff like that. Nobody is interested in boys are getting like their brushing their hair particularly, or emptying litter boxes, or doing the dishes. So that's been great. But I do find, though, as I describe sort of in the book, is that sometimes, the clock of being a mother, I call it the day job of being a mother, can sort of be out of whack with family life. And I particularly find really challenging, like I've said, that midpoint of the afternoon. So the French call 4 a.m. the hour of the wolf, when the wolf comes out. But I think of it as 4 p.m. is really the glucose drop mid-afternoon thing, when you're picking the kids up and they're just like, and you're just so sensitive to the sound of their voices. And my girls have high-pitched voices, and they're always describing the plots of Nickelodeon TV shows. And like I say, you know what, I think as a parent I'm supposed to listen to my children, but I don't think there's any rule where you have to listen to them describe the plots of television shows. Pretty much. So that and then you have to go to Trader Joe's at the bad parking lot, the bad samples, to try and scrounge up some dinner. So I find even the family dinner hour is difficult, because you have to feed them at 6 or 7, and the idea of sitting and conversing with people while eating is a violation. Kind of like you're about to bite into something, and it's like, how was your day? So at that time you really want to be. I want to be alone. I want to eat dinner at 4 p.m. alone in a cave in Siberia to do with them. So it'll be interesting to see if you can stand putting dinner on the table when that beautiful time comes.
Who else? We saw more hands earlier.
There's a little cautious.
I'll throw one while we're waiting. So I think you kind of mentioned this when you mentioned the gig in New York. So we have the book, and it's taking on another life or two. There's going to be a one-woman show?
Yeah, so
Or-
I've been
what
starting
else is
to
happening?
develop, thanks to the Sundance Workshop, who's been really great, of developing a new show out of this because I haven't done a show in about 6 years. So, you know, and I think that there was the Vagina Monologues by Eve Ensler, and then there's Love, Loss, and What I Wore by Julia Ephron. And so, you know, and so I've kind of started developing this, and it's myself and 2 actresses doing a Greek chorus. But I think and it's been really fun so far. So I think some of the questionnaires have been out there, because like Nora Ephron, that was always what they would do, give a questionnaire of what people's, you know, experiences and phrases and stuff out there is. So you can put your name on it or not. It's optional. I also have the same questionnaire on my website of people have said some pretty hilarious and wild things about what they've gone through, and so that may be part of the fabric of the piece. I will give you 1.2% of the royalties. So that's been a real fun experience so far.
Cool. Someone over here?
Hi, Sandra. It's
Yes.
Astrid. Hi. I thought you'd be thrilled to know that, if this is TMI, I apologize. My lovely sister, the doctor, says that there is an epidemic of young, fit women coming in with basically kale overdoses.
What?
Really?
What?
You know what? We have known each other for so long, and you've told me so many valuable things, but that may be the best. Nah, what is a kale overdose? Can you describe what that is?
Apparently some kind of nutritional deficiency you get from eating too much kale.
That makes me so happy. And but I think that, you know, the point that, but this addresses something else, and there was in a letter that someone wrote me, that our conventional means of coping, which would be going to Starbucks, getting a skinny latte and a cake pop, putting on NPR Morning Edition, hearing that music, you know, having a little walk, eating some kale, going to therapy, you know, that these are ways of coping. But I think, you know, in midlife, you know, not only is kale not enough, but I think sort of the part of this whole book is also saying, you know what, our normal ways of coping are not can't work. And I think it all will come back to kale. But I just sort of also wanted to point out, aside from that statistic about how long full-time working moms spend with their children as opposed to 1950s moms, I think that certainly women have so many hats that they're wearing. One is kind of like, there's the full-time working hat. Then there's the super mom parenting hat that you have to drive them to activities all weekend, and even when you're pregnant, eat the kale and stretch Mozart headphones over the belly and that sort of thing. And then while that is going on, the co-parenting and co-working, you're also supposed to have date night once a week to kind of keep it fresh. Like that's another thing on your to-do list, you know, buy negligee. You know, and that's really hard to bring that up when you're stepping over toys and the email is going off that you feel like you're a failure if you don't keep it sassy. And you know, and then the fourth thing is that women we're also sort of responsible for healing all the global ills of the world. For instance, if we don't have a hot, home-cooked or slow-cooked dinner, don't get me going on the slow cooking movement. Are you kidding me, Michael Paul? Slow cooking. Oh, the pleasures of the kitchen. Just slow it down. Anyway, don't get me started. It's like, you know, many of us have been slow cooking, fast cooking for years and years. We didn't sort of discover it like in the kitchen. Oh my God, you can cook something. You know, we've been doing it for years. Whatever. So that even, you know, and I think women take on, so you got the work, you got the perfect mothering, you got the date night, and also, unless you get dinner on the table, which is slow cooked from locally sourced organic ingredients, so we can fight against the agribusinesses, fight against and obesity. It's kind of like, so that there are so many things on your plate, and I write about in the book of, you know, where Barbara, Ehrenreich, thank you. In Nickel and Dime wrote that she would never hire anyone to clean her house because if you're a third world woman scrubbing your toilets, you're oppressing a sister. So on top of that, I couldn't have anyone clean my house ever. So you can imagine my house is like gross now. It's kind of like I have ants in my Volvo and whatever. And so that where you're taking on so many different things, that it's too much, and then they tell you to, you know, have some therapy and have a walk and have some kale. And it's kind of tamping down. It's kind of like, you know what, have a cocktail, have a smoke, you know, sit down. You know, if that's what my mother always had, that one smoke at the end of the day. So, you know, sometimes that's it. And I do know anecdotally that there are many women who say they allow most of their Weight Watchers points to Pinot Grigio. It's like, and I bet there's some people in this room that aren't saying that they're doing that as well. And I'm not saying that, you know, kind of like, oh, do cocaine and run around and do that, but you know, just to do it in moderation and just relax a little bit about this.
When you finally did, was it the doctor you went to? You talk about someone gave you some. Someone told you a story. I think it was a doctor, and it was the analogy
yes.
was paper plates.
Yes.
And yeah, do you want to share that?
Yes, and this is what I finally learned from the gynecologist, where she finally came in and said, first of all, and I would recommend to any woman going through this or whatever, you may have a good gynecologist, you may not have you may have a bad one, but I think a good one will bring you in like she did, and she saw me for about an hour. Oh, and she's right here in Pasadena. So if you need the number, she's right up the street near the Huntington. She's really good. And she was this incredibly comforting, sort of your Scandinavian maiden aunt. This is a cardigan and cornflower blue eyes. And I sat there on my paper gown on the metal table, just and I do want to say that with the weight thing, there was a funny thing, funny now, that happened where I'm just like crying, I can't. And they go, Sandra, and so they come and lead me in. Of course, they put me on the scale, and I see a number, and it's like, oh my God, it's the biggest number I've ever seen. It's like 10 to the 12th power, e to the xi epsilon gamma sigma. Needed a linear accelerator to figure out the size of the number. And then they go, is your name Sarah? I go, no, it's Sandra. I go, oh, sorry, we wrong person. Go out to the waiting room. I'm crying again. I'm like, oh my God, now I weigh Z to the epsilon. I don't even know, Jesus. Sandra, so now I come back in. They put me on the same scale. I feel I have at least lost water weight, and I am 1.5 pounds heavier. How does this happen? My tears are making fat. I'm this amazing creature that's making fat out of air. They should lipo me and then like send it to Africa and power turbines or something. It's amazing. So, but she finally sits me down and she listens to me for 45 minutes. As I just, and she goes, well, now, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how depressed are you? I go, well, mostly it's an 8, but sometimes it's a 4, and then sometimes it's more like a blue-green darkness, and then sometimes it's a purple Edward Hopper painting that even a bunny has the Edward Hopper colors and the purple shadow. And so she just sat with a pad and then wrote down my periods and whatever, giving it kind of a scientific frame that was comforting. She probably threw the pad away later, whatever. But then she said to me, here's the speech. She said, Sandra, let me see if I can explain it for you this way. The way I see it, there are 2 kinds of women, paper plate girls and Chinette girls. Paper plate girls, boy, you just put a carrot on them and they just fall apart. Chinette girls, you can put a lot on that plate and it won't crack. I think at heart, you are having a emotional response to just a physiological phenomenon. But I think at heart, Sandra, you are a Chinette girl. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a few things off the plate, and then we're going to strengthen the plate. And that way of putting it and taking things off the plate, take the PTA thing off, take the Christmas letter off, take those things off your plate, and then if you need something underneath, she recommended either some hormones, some low-level antidepressants, she says, or you may have nothing at all. Just when it comes over, you just go, oh, notice that I'm having a very, very crazy, wacky feeling, and that it will go away eventually. So she gave me those 3 choices. I went for a little estrogen bump, as I like to call it. But just hearing that was this kind of great way of listening that sometimes it's difficult for husbands to listen to their wives because, you love me, you... I don't want to say the bad word. That's like, you know, so that and when you're a woman, you're just trying to ask for love. And like, I love you. Hold me now. You're kind of like the Exorcist. You know, it's like, you go, Jesus, and the green vomit. Enough already. Okay, so the point being, but what I found overall, and the point of this journey was that for a moment, I had a mother. My mother died a long time ago. For a moment, when she just gave me that plate, or the plate metaphor, she and the estrogen gel, for the moment I had a mom, like Christiane, who just went, there. Let's take your hand. Let's sit. You know, that's why women love spas so much. That's kind of like someone's taking care of them for a moment. And then I felt better. So it was kind of the combination of that speech and who she was and the little estrogen bump that was really good. But I think that's probably what I would say to the rest of women, too.
Over here. Thank you.
A man. Nice.
A brave man.
Not that we have it easy either.
No.
In your research, did you come across any figures or cultures ethnologically that were perhaps less industrialized where you identified a tradition among women that's smoother or easier here?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And there's a couple of interesting ones. They say, like, famously Mayan women, in your neighborhood or mine, Mayan women don't have negative menopause symptoms for whatever reason. And in China, and they sometimes use, like, angelica or dong quai, which is kind of herb to treat those symptoms. So they sort of don't. And sort of there's more of a tradition in India, in Hindu cultures, that after, and I always get this wrong, it's the homemakers or the housekeepers or the people who have made their homes for a while and then they ascend to the next level, that third part of life, where it's an ascension into spirituality. You can turn inward. What's that called? The householders, thank you so much. So the forgetfulness. So that once they move past the householders, then it's a time of sort of freedom and spirituality and turning inward. So that's really more viewed as a positive thing. So yes, good question, and thank you for bringing that up. So a question back there.
This one over here.
Hi, Paula Tavro. I always wonder how long really is menopause, and is there truly post-menopause? Like, for instance, I was going through 15 to 20 hot flashes a day. So I mentioned it to a colleague who's 74, and she said, "Oh, I'm still getting hot flashes." It's like, oh no. So I just wanted, in your research, did you learn anything about, is there endpoints?
Well, it seems to really vary a lot, and, you know, I don't want to, say it, but somebody said that their 94-year-old mother says, I'm still having them. So, or she thinks she's having them, whatever, she's having them. So it seems to really vary. And I know that some women have been on sort of low-level hormones for 15, 20 years, and they try to go off them, and it comes back, but their health is fine. So, there were sort of the big breast cancer scare with the Women's Health Initiative around 2002. But it's kind of a certain combination that brings that up. So people can have it a long time, but it's cleansing the chakras. So. No, I do hear some really funny stories, and then, people who, like, their whole bed is, like, the sheets are heavy on the floor and just sopping the floor and stuff like that, and that keeps their kids from climbing into bed with them, so that's good.
This one over here.
I'm so grateful to see you after listening to you on the radio so often, and to see what a performance artist that you are, very graphic and entertaining. I'm wondering how you were at UCI when you taught 2 classes recently.
Oh, what a nice question. Well, thank you. I love talking about that. So so the Lowdown on Science, which is a Science Minute, is now being kind of like UC Irvine is sort of helming the production of it and helping support it. And so part of the deal was that I was teaching 2 classes down there. But it's a great left and right brain thing, because I taught science communication to science grad students, which is the right brain approach to a left brain field. And then for undergraduates, I taught art and aesthetics, which is kind of a left brain approach to a right brain thing. And that was actually really fun. First, it was sort of alarming because, particularly with the undergraduate class, it was a relatively small class of 50 people, which to me is huge, but for them, they go. And so what I love about UC Irvine and our great UC system in California is that this year half of their graduates will be first-generation college students, which is fantastic. And that's part of my thing of public education. They're very mixed ethnically in the way that California is. So, I kind of, because I grew up in California, went to school here, I've always had a little bit of an East Coast, Ivy Leagues, East Coast. And even in my writing career, I've had to, we don't worry about that anymore, but there was a time when as writers, we'd go, they're all in New York and doing that. So I sort of was really committed with these kids who were awesome. Some came from Korea. One had this amazing tattoo of Quetzalcoatl, who I think is the goddess of wisdom up his arm. And I go, you know what, we're going to do art 2,000 years of art and aesthetics right here in this class. I taught out of a graduate level literary criticism text, and we went from Plato, through Dante and Kant and Wilde and beyond, and it was super fun because you're teaching art 100. And it's kind of like, and it can be what you want. So, and they have these smart classrooms. So since we're learning theory, I could pair kind of Led Zeppelin with Gustave Doré's etchings of Dante's Inferno. And part of the fun was introducing stuff to them that they'd never seen, like the Magritte, this is not a pipe painting. And at one point, because not all of them knew Ravel, I said, you know what? We're gonna just turn out the lights for 4.5 minutes, and we're gonna play Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe, Dawn. And it was this amazing, it was just to be able to give that to students. It's kind of like, that's what college and Art 100, yeah, that's what, that's it. And so it was fantastic, and they were really turned on and excited, and I said, first of all, it's called Dawn, and when you hear it, and if you know that piece of music, you're going to see a big bird and sky and something, so see if you can picture this thing happening with this music. Then afterwards, Fonita sang, who's, I think, Taiwanese, she said to me, you completely ruined it. Next time you play it for kids, don't tell them it was Dawn. Because I was having they were just, it was so exciting to have kids who were not jaded and were really hungry, especially down there in Orange County where everything looks a little bit like a mini mall, to see this art. So it was really a very fantastic experience, and I'm going to do it again next year. So thank you for asking. I loved it. Here's another.
I think we're down to our last one or two, so if anybody has any more, raise your hands.
Hi, my name is Rana. I was just wondering how much you talk to your daughters about your menopausal symptoms and going through what you've been going through. I have 2 daughters that are a little bit older than yours, but I often will talk about things. I want to bring it out in the open, and they're like, oh, Mom. Yeah. And sometimes I think they think that I'm trying to make excuses for my behavior, and rather than trying to kind of rationalize what might be going on, I think they see it as an excuse for acting crazy. So I just thought maybe if you could talk on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think, and again, as opposed to my mother's generation where we just couldn't talk at all and she disappeared and that was really scary. I mean, they've seen me break down, they've seen me say horrible words in traffic that they just laugh and just cry and throw things and whatever. But because I'm sort of more present for them and I don't disappear for long periods of time, they're sort of used to it and they roll with it. And so they don't have a mother that disappeared. I'm around. I may be screaming at the traffic, but I will return to normal fairly soon. So I think, it's part of everybody has a quirky mother, a wacky mother in some way. They may, and so that's the mother that your daughters have. And sometimes, I like to say, as long as you don't put your head in the oven, you're doing a great job. That I think so. You were around, or Roseanne Barr used to say, if my kids are alive at the end of the day, I've done my job. And I think we should go back to that. Was like a great thing, because we're doing a lot and we're there for them. So I think your daughters are lucky that they have a great mother, that I'll say. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're lucky to have had this time with you today, Miss Sandra, and lucky that you all joined us here at the Crawford Family Forum, and lucky that we have Janice and all the other folks who make the forum happen for us each and every week here at KPCC. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and keep on listening and keep on coming to the forum, and find our live stream whenever you can't make it here yourself. Again, many thanks.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you. Sandra's going to be signing right out there.